Hello all and welcome to my actual craft room, the place that gets messy. This video is going to be about a mixed media canvas creation that started with a nice pattern background paper and also a digistamp from the Simpler Times CD-ROM. It's about 40 minutes long, so do grab yourself a cup of tea and I hope you enjoy it. So I've collected together all of my bits and pieces. I've had a good old rummage around the craft room and I've tried looking for things that work well within the colour scheme of the turquoise, which was basically inspired by the paper that I chose. The image came from the Simpler Times CD-ROM from Katie Sue Designs. This is one that I've coloured in previously, but obviously I've enlarged this and put it onto white and then obviously cut it out in a circle. That's going to be coloured in with the Spectrum Noir pens. I've chosen to use GT1, 2 and 3 and also BT1, 2 and 4. I chose to discard 3 as it has slightly bluer tinge that didn't quite match the colour tone that I wanted to blend through. I've got the blender pen there as well in case I need it. I've got phthalo green acrylic ink here. That may come in useful for me for painting a few bits or maybe edging the canvas. I've got some turquoise stickles just in case, we all love a bit of bling. To add some detail to the design, I've got out my Inkadinkado stamping gear. I've got the small cog with the circular paddle, and I'm choosing to use this sort of forest fern design because it matches the grassy fronds that are in the main image. I may not use the others, but we'll see how the thing progresses. For a little extra colour here and there, I've got the Stream Adirondack Earth Tone and the Pool Adirondack Bright. I've also got the Pine Needles and Peacock Feathers Tim Holtz Distress ink pads along with the Pine Needles Distress marker. To apply these, obviously I've got some makeup sponges here, and for the pen I've got the spritzer over there. Everything else obviously I'll try and explain as I go along, but for now I'm going to get started. So to get things started, I'm using Mod Podge and a brush, and I'm going to apply the paper to the canvas. Mod Podge, I'm really just sort of squidging onto, oh, probably a bit too much, squidging onto the canvas, spreading it over all the way to the edges. Doesn't matter if I go over a bit. I'm trying not to have big pools of it because I don't particularly want the paper to warp. So, on that goes. On my fingers as well. Obviously I'm using my tonic glass cutting mat to try and avoid getting my desk covered, and I'm just putting that on, smoothing it out over the edges, and I'm actually going to use my sponge to try and push it out towards the edges so it sticks. Paper is warping just a little bit because it's getting damp and wet with the glue, but that's fine. As long as I can make sure that it sticks to the edges, this will work just beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside to dry. I'm actually, when I put it down to dry, going to push it down face down. I'll probably even pop something in the middle of it, like a big tub of gesso, just to make sure that it sticks. So we'll pop that over to one side, and we're going to make a start on our colouring. So I mentioned earlier that I'm using the Spectrum Noir pen set to colour in my main image. She's from the Simpler Times CD-ROM, and I'm going to use the GT1, 2 and 3 and the BT1, 2 and 4. I'm going to use them for different things though. The lighter tones, the BT tones, I'm going to use for the background areas, and the GT tones I'm going to use for the foreground areas. That will hopefully give the impression of the colours popping through. So my first colour choice is going to be BT1, and I'm using the chisel tip end, and I'm just going to colour fill the whole background area. Now for this part down here, I'm also going to add in the BT2 because I want it to look like there's sort of a horizon of grass. So I'm not being too precious about details at this stage, I'm just colour blocking. Your eye doesn't see detail in the background. Yeah, that goes through there, and then through there. And then a little bit of that. Okay, now What I'm now going to do is use the blender pen and go over that whole area and just soften it down. Okay, so I'm going back in with the BT1 again, and I'm again just going over this area, but I'm not coming down exactly to where I said that horizon was. I'm just adding in more squiggles of this extra colour tone. And what I'm trying to do is give a graduation between the top sky and the horizon. And the same now with the BT2, but this time I'm bringing the colour down this way. I'm also now going to bring in the BT4, but with the fine tip, and just start darkening down this area just to give it a bit more, and then darkening where these grasses are. And you might think it's going on quite thick at the moment and that it's quite intense and that there's bits everywhere, but it softens down as it dries, because as the alcohol evaporates, then the colour softens. And also I'm going to keep blending in between each layer. So you can see now hopefully that there is some graduation, especially around this area. Where am I? I'm going to go in with BT2 a little bit on the sky now, but just sort of taking it over the edges so that it's almost just highlighting the circular form of this topper. But I'm going straight back in with my BT1 and just trying to make sure this blends out more. Okay, I think I'm getting there with that. They're not bad. So while that sort of dissipates and dries a bit, I'm going to actually move on to the main area of the design and start with the GT1 pen. And this is going to block in the main colours of this sort of 4 characters, as it were. And you can see how GT1 is quite similar to the BT2 pen that I was using. So they're sort of sitting at the same plane of visibility, if you'd like to call it that. But we'll try and work on this, and the little bunnies hopefully will come to the foreground. So I'm just going to switch to fast forward mode, and then you can see this coming together quite quickly. So for the next stage, I've let my coloured in image sit to one side so all the alcohol in the inks can evaporate, and I've just brought back on the canvas so I can tell that it's started to stick. What I'm going to do though is now put a coat of Mod Podge on top of this as well, and that's just really to sort of seal it and to make sure those fibres are really going into excuse me, the canvas. And I'm just painting that all over so that it sticks through and soaks into the paper. You can choose to do this bit or not do this bit. This is also helping me stick those edges down as well, and sometimes it pays to sort of do this just so that when you get to sort of sanding it down at the end you can save yourself a job, or just have it flush to the canvas. So we're going in there, I'm just making sure that all of the glue is through on there. You can see it wrinkling here and there, that's fine, it's exactly what I want. I do want that distressed look. Just going to pop a bit more on as well. It's going everywhere now. Just sealing down the edges. Don't use your plaster, John. I burnt myself cooking some tea earlier. Here's a tip: don't pick up a hot pan. There you go. That's for free. Just putting a bit more on this edge. Slightly bigger overhang on this side. Sometimes getting your fingers involved is just as therapeutic as using the brush or doing any kind of crafting. So a bit more on here. You might think this is probably a bit excessive, but it's down to personal choice, I guess. Right, so that's all on, and I'm now just sort of spreading it so that it doesn't congeal in one area. Just want to take some of that off as well. And this is very quick drying, this Mod Podge, so it actually dries, you know, as you're painting it, which is why I'm working quite quickly here. I'm going to dry this off with a heat tool in a minute, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, I think we're about there. Right, just need to very quickly clean up this gunky mess. So I've just got a wet wipe, quickly go over the glass mat with that. And then wipe it off with a kitchen towel. That's why I love these glass mats. You can get messy and then you can quickly clean up. And it doesn't ruin your work surface. Right, for the next step I've got the Tim Holtz Distress Marker in the Pine Needles colour. I'm going to use the brush nib end, and I'm going to use the Perfect Spritzer to apply some initial shading to the edge. So I'm just lining that tip up so that it's over the air hole of the spritzer. Now what I'm going to do is just hold it about 3 or 4 inches from the edge and start pumping all the way around. I'm not being too delicate or precious about it. I just want to get that colour on. Now because it's sitting on top of the Mod Podge, obviously it's going to take time to dry, but it also means this also means that I can activate it with some water. So I'll do that in a second, and then that will help blend it out a bit. Okay, so I'll just take that out of there, pop the lid back on and put that to one side. Just getting a little water spritzer bottle now, and I'm going to spritz that with some water. So you can see how that immediately starts spreading with the water. And that's exactly what I want, because it's now starting to sort of creep into the centre of that design. But I'm going to start applying heat as quickly as I can so that it will dry off and not creep too far in. It's going to probably help spread it a little bit more as well with the directional hot air. Now that's actually a bit too much for what I wanted, so what I'm going to do is re-wet it and then dab some off with a paper towel. Okay, so that's softening nicely. Just a little bit more, I reckon. Wipe that off there as well. Pop the lid back on there, and then I'll just dry again using the heat tool. Okay, so I think we're sort of getting somewhere. You can see how it's much softer now, and it's given it almost a shaded look. So there were just a couple of bits of kitchen towel that came on there, so I'm just going to actually rub over that with my sponge to make sure they come off. Right, so I think next what we're going to do is actually start darkening the edges of the canvas. So what I'm going to do is get some of my phthalo green acrylic paint, and I'm going to apply it with a tiny bit of water. Just work that into my sponge and start spreading it down the side of the canvas. Not going for, again, I'm not going for neatness or uniformity, I'm just trying to get some colour there to start working it all in together. For me, this is about refining things as you go along. It's not about getting it right first time. So there we go, that's on there. Just a bit more down that side and a bit more down that side. Now canvas dries quickly, so I've got to work quick here, and again I'm going to start wetting this paint. And then I'm going to get a new bit of sponge that hasn't got any paint on, and I'm just going to go around and start roughing that off. Now it's probably going to take some of the distress ink off as well, but it's leaving these fantastic sort of scuffed edges almost. So I'm just taking it off lightly in some places and not so lightly in others, and then I'm going to reapply. This may seem crazy, but for me this is what it's all about, and I'm still keeping this sort of white fresh area in the middle. Again, I'm grabbing some kitchen towel and taking away quite a lot of what's in the middle there, because I want to keep that fresh white look. So we're going to put the sponges to one side. I'll just take some of this paint off the mat, give that a quick dry again. Right, next what you think I'm going to do is probably going to be crazy, but I'm getting some PVA glue and squidging it along the sides. Oops, just a massive amount there. Ridiculous. Don't think I'd even ice a cake like this, but it's hopefully going to have the effect that we want. I'm going to chuck some stickles in there as well. Just dollop it all along. All around the edge. Then I'm going to get one of the sponges again and just dab that all along. So you can see how the glitter is kind of spreading into the PVA. Obviously PVA dries clear. Now what I'm going to do is get some more of that paint, squish it onto my glass mat, get it into the sponge with that PVA, dab it around. Okay, so I'm going to try and take some of that off my sponge by spreading it everywhere and then lifting a bit more off and spreading. Now what I'm going to do is just very quickly clean up. So canvas back in, here we go, heat tool on, and what I'm going to try and do is heat this so that it bubbles. It's probably going to be difficult for you to see, but I can see it drying there and also bubbling. So I'm keeping the heat source as close to this as possible and then moving along to the next bit, and hopefully when this all dries it'll dry clear, it will have texture, and it will have some of that glitter in it as well. So I've left the canvas to one side to dry, and now what I'm going to do is go back to working on my digi-stamped image. I've got some stamp masking paper from Inkadinka here, and this is one sheet of it. It's basically just like a paper with a self-adhesive backing. And what I'm going to do is do a little cloud bank that's going to sit across the horizon. So I know roughly that I need it to be the width of this paper. So all I'm going to do is take a little circular template. This one's from Helix. And I'm going to start by using a fairly big circle, this one here, just about here. Yeah, here. I'm then going to start just attaching other different size circles just along the horizontal line, or the horizon, shall we say. Just joining them all together with other circles of different sizes. That one. Let's have a big one there. Here I'm all stuck up with glue. Now what I'm going to do is just use a small pair of scissors and cut that out. I try and cut each curve in one fluid motion, regardless of whether it follows exactly the line, just because then you don't get all those jagged lines of when you're trying to, you know, do 2 or 3 cuts like I just did. So I just have a couple of tiny little bits there that need tidying up. And now what I've got is obviously a mask, so I can use it to mask there and shade down, or use it to mask here and shade up. So obviously I'm going to shade up. Now I don't need all of this. Obviously that would be a waste if I used all of it, so I can save that piece for another time. I can save the negative for another occasion, and for this one I'm just going to stick it all the way across, just there. So it's going to run across fairly horizontal, fairly parallel to the horizon. So that's my mask in place. Now obviously I don't want her face in place, but it's fine because I'm not spraying. What I'm going to be doing is using one of my pens. So if I go for GT, let's see now, maybe BT2. I'll put that one, there we go. So BT2, so I'm just roughly, I'm going to use the chisel end. If you've got a brush end, that would probably work better for this, but I'm just, you know, just going to brush out from the cloud bank. But obviously when I get to the young girl, I'm just going to be careful about what I'm doing. And then here, I'll just carry on. That probably doesn't matter there anyway. Then I'm going to use my BT1. Should have organised these pens a bit better when I put them back. BT1. And just go over that to soften it out a bit more. Now obviously I think these will probably soak through this paper, so I might get some residual colouring, but that's fine. And then the blender I'm going to use to hopefully soften the whole lot down. And then fingers crossed, because I've never tried this one before with this masking paper, we should have a cloud bank. So I'm just peeling this away now. Looking good so far. Now it has taken some of my ink from my Digistamp, but not so much that it's ruined it, so it's fine. And there we go. Oh, it's left a bit of the sticky behind. We'll just take that off. There we go. And there we go. You can just about make out the outline of the cloud bank there, which actually looks very, very nice. It's very subtle and soft. And obviously as that dries, I think it'll work a bit better. I might just go over it a bit more though with the blender. No, GT1 first. BT1. BT1 first. So if I just trace out that line that's been created. Deliberately extending beyond where I need it to be, because I'm then going to go in with my blender and soften that edge out. There we go. Yeah, looks good. I'm liking the way there's sort of a halo almost, a white aura forming around her head. So I think we're almost getting there with the main image here, but there's probably a few more things I'd want to do. I think I'm going to pop some stickles, little diamondy bits, tiny dots in the centre of the flowers. I'm not going to let them be raised, I'm going to spread them out. Obviously the flowers in her hair. Oops, that's one there. How's that? Okay, good. What I'm going to do obviously later on is create some flowers that match these flowers and maybe some corn husks and have those around that on the main canvas. So hopefully that will come through. I think I just need to darken these grass fronds off a little bit more. So I'm going to go for the GT3, probably a bit too dark, but we'll see. It's just really to sort of give the impression of those shaded areas, because most of the light's coming from here, as you can tell from the rest of the image, hopefully. So it's really just a suggestion of there being shadows within the area. GT2 back in here, just to sort of soften that dark area down. And I'm stippling this time, just purely because if there are fronds of grass here, they wouldn't be one solid block of colour. They would be a variety of different shades. And obviously you can use the different chisel ends or bullet tip for this. Okay, there we go. I think we're getting there. What else have we got? I think I might do some distress spritzing around it as well and see how we can do with that. Now I'm just wondering if this one will be a bit too dark. We'll give it a go. So if I test it on a bit of card first. Okay, I think maybe if I do it from this angle and just one or two puffs, gives it a nice speckled, almost grainy feel, like in an old photograph. Now if I want to soften this down, I can obviously go in afterwards with a water spritzer. The water spritzer won't affect the alcohol markers, but it will obviously soften down the distress marker, which is ultimately what I would want. Now let's have a look. Let's see if we can use any of these inks. Just pop you up there for a moment, madam, and let's see what the Adirondack stream looks like. Although it looks kind of greeny on here, it's very blue here. I'm not sure that's what I want. So if I just turn the pad over, yes, that's much better. I think I'll use that and shade the edges here. Now I've just got to be careful when I'm doing this, because obviously there's lots of bits of things going on in terms of wet inks and wet glues. But I'm just trying to soften the edges, or darken the edges, sorry, with some of this Pine Needles Distress ink. Almost give the suggestion that she's in like a memory, a wispy memory. Trying to figure out where I can get hold of without mucking it up. Oops, a bit too much there. It's okay, we can soften it down later. Actually quite works. Almost looks like the rabbits are sort of in the background somewhere. Now, I am going to spritz it with water and see if that makes a difference, but I've already lost my... there we go. But first, I'm going to get rid of this, because I don't want that accidentally seeping onto it. Now, I know the glitter's there, but to be honest, if that spreads, I'm not that bothered. I'm just going to spritz the water all over and hope it doesn't spread the printer ink. Okay, seems to be working. I'm going to go back in and actually remove some of that with a brush, a fine detail brush later on with in her face, sorry, because I think it's probably given her a bit too much. The cloud banks soften into the background as well, which was a very nice unexpected result. So I'm just drying this off quickly. I'll tell you what I need my chip tray. Right, okay, so there she is. She has got some very nice speckled edges around here. Shading's nice. I am definitely going to try and get rid of that around her face. I'll probably do it with a water brush. In fact, let me have a go at doing that now. Priming that. And let's see if I can do this now. Well, it does look like she's got freckles, bless her. If all else fails, I could go over this with a white paint and see if that helps. Okay, it's coming away a bit, but let's have a look. What have I got? White paint. Cream, that'll do. Ugh, come on. Tiny bit of white paint out there. Get some water in. And then let's go over. I'm using a watered down white acrylic. Is it acrylic? Yes, acrylic paint. Because that will actually be semi-translucent, so it'll still allow the green shading that I did earlier with the alcohol markers through. And I think if I keep this to her skin only, then it might actually end up looking quite good, because the speckles will be on her clothes. And it could be one of those happy accidents. So just taking that theory and applying it to the feet. Yeah, this is working. Okay, I think just a tiny bit more on the face and the neck. Yep, come on feet. And then we'll pop you back on the chip tray, love, and dry you off. Okay, I think that is that part of the canvas done. So let's just compare. Obviously the things side by side. So the colour schemes are working together, the designs are working together. I've got the glitter going on the edge of here, I've got the glitter going on in here. It's kind of tying all together so far. Obviously she's going to sit in the middle, but I've got a little more decoration that I want to do. So we've got the final stages ready to go. I've skipped ahead a little bit and made a few extras to go with it. I've been at my die cutting station with my big shot, and I've cut out some flowers with Spellbinder's die, some flourishes, some leaves with a punch, some flowers with a punch, and I've already assembled those. I've mounted my finished colouring in Digistamp onto some cardstock. I did add some extra colour to the canvas in between takes, just to really sort of deepen that tone. I've got my pin flare glue gel ready and my tweezers for applying the flowers. The pens I made with some cardstock and the Perfect Layers ruler, and then I spritzed a little of the pine needles ink onto them, just to really sort of give them that rustic look that goes with the main image. As I said, the flowers were already formed, but I've used my tonic flower forming tools just to really give them a little bit of shape, and then layer them on top of each other with a dab of glue. Now I'm going to go ahead and start assembling all of this, so I need to clear the decks, and I'll switch to fast forward mode, and then you can see it all come together very quickly. So there we have it, all complete and a complete mess in the craft room. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave comments at the bottom of the screen or over on the blog. Take care for now.